Good morning. Che ya Teresa Wedding che do ta ba han shlo de best jin ba shi chin ki ane da shi che do na jene da shi na le a hot o e ya ni che da house si do le. Good morning to you all and all the other honorable delegates that are online. Good morning. A good on each da house si do le. Chair, back to you.
Kushila, Ms. Woody, thank you. Ms. Khan? Ms. Siako? From Speaker's Office, Ms. Siako? Not here? No. Okay. Kushila,
Chair Nez, apologies for interrupting. This is Dana Bobroff, Chief Legislative Counsel. I will be covering this morning for Ms. Khan.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bobroff. I appreciate you being on the call. Thank you. Let's go to staff, Mr. Alana.
Good morning, everyone. Mike Holonen, the quiet the never care about that's danger. Audition is not there. Though, but I strong, I see, but it's changed 1200 on that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Alona. Ms. Etty Anderson-Abasta.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, RDC members. My name is Etty Anderson-Abasta. Tenal Disney, born for Hushkushni, Vilagana, Dashache, Tutney Sukni, Dashanoa. I am from Sawmill, Arizona, and I'm the Department Manager for the General Land Development Department. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen Chischili.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chair. Thank you for that. My name is Stephen Chischili.
Good morning. My name is Judy Hudson. I'm the leasing agent for FLAD.
So that's Stevie Hudson. I get all these emails, and now I see what you look like. Thank you. Next staff.
Martin.
Thank you. Department of Justice, are you on the call?
Oh, yat a Chair. She Paulina Beta and Chair Nakadana initially. Bitch ahi bashes chin ki ani dash che ado Italian dash nale. Yekut as son initially ado tojale de nasha he.
Kushina. We also have on the call with us Chairman Edmund Yazzie.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Oh.
Good morning, Chair and committee members and staff and everyone that's online. I am calling from home site lease 847-455 BIA, Coolidge, New Mexico. That's where I'm calling from. And Yate Bennett, good morning to everyone. My clans are Tohi Klini, Todichini, Pashin, Setnajini, Dashiche, Ashin, Dashinale. Originally from Crown Point, New Mexico, and my late Nullies are from Standing Rock, and my late Che is from Whitehorse, New Mexico, but I am married to my wife from Coolidge. So anyhow, thank you, and I'll be listening online. Good morning, committee members and Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Yazzie. We also have one of our colleagues calling in from Washington, D.C., Honorable Key Allen Begay, Jr.
Chairman, can you hear me?
Oh.
Chairman, good morning. Again, this is Delegate Key Allen Begay, Jr. Good morning, Honor. Kudosha Dedje, Hanawani, Nanslon Key Ani, that's I need to say other this sheet, the Edashanale. Poko Kodo Resource Development Committee Adita Sitado Shlanda Atli Patka Shaki just as Aratchi Besot Resendeski such a good as Salana Maslin Adadak Halana Hot I Kodo Captain the station on this instance so did asking each das in the list though I don't hear the chairman. We're doing what we can over here in DC again. But I appreciate everything that we're all doing. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for representing the chapters in DC also. Okay, Honorable Vice Chair Walker.
Yes, Chairman, though, committee members, staff, colleagues of the 24th Navajo Nation Council, though the presenters for today. Thomas Walker Schneedo. I represent 5 chapters out here, Western Agency. Those chapters are Loop, Talani Lake, Bird Springs, Cameron, and Coal Mine Canyon. What echo? Adoa don't mention a shin. Between that and tots on the Asia Chi. General it's a discussion that echo. Oh, what echo do yat enana. Ishinya, where you know, it's a deep place to go. Now, so, thank you.
Kushina, Honorable Vice Chair Walker, thank you. We also have one of our colleagues with us, Honorable Paul Begay.
Oh, yeah, they have been Chair, Honorable Rick Nez, members of the Resource and Development Committee. Good morning. Delegate Paul Begay. Now, Costo Ahben Hin Hall Ahben. Ado Bishaki, Tanaban Sabatin, Tchi, Baby To. Ado Tonelli, Ade Banat Ahnsla. Tedeshkizin den Enslon be Petoni Buses chain. Ado for the Chini Chi that. Chanale Kia Anit Nedandla. But ego den Ensla. Yeah.
Thank you, Honorable Begay, for joining the Resource and Development Committee meeting this morning, work session. We have from the Office of the President, Vice President, Teresita.
Good morning, Chair. Yate Bennett, Teresita Clash, and Yenisheth was a change slog with an anesthesia touch the buses chain to the Chanel. My excuse me, this Chair. I switched this. I'm sorry. Good morning. I am from the Office of the President, Vice President. I am an Executive Staff Assistant. I am happy to be here, and I look forward to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boshin. Anybody else on the call with us that would like to introduce themselves? I hear none. Thank you. We're on number 2 of the agenda. The purpose of our work session today is we had agreed back on December 21st that Resource and Development Committee would have its final work session with Navajo Land Department, General Land Development Department to discuss the church land use permit regulations and the proposed amendments today. So after this, we will have a legislation drafted to go through for approval. So the church hunt so go Kaya had dropped it, it has anigi. The nail is no the quidishin classically dog, a DJ, you have been the deal is to not for the nail, but il net or sabet, and had it a hiki had a door nail that needs so a and number 3, presentation discussions. There will be a summary of Tuesday's meeting back on December 21st, 2021. At the work session seat, at the seat, Lego, deep on the seat, in a condition, Koro Aske, Dash Tishiki, Dash Stroki, So, Mr. Halona, so at this time, I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Halona.
Chairman Nez, so yat nana. I know what I not all the honorable delegates that are on the call. The apiyad and the sanda khala check. Atahalia. I call just to summarize real quickly on the overview of the mission site regulations. They were established in the code in 1970. And in 1970, when council passed the mission site regulations that were codified, at that time, they also mentioned that all previous documents, instruments, whatever was used, either by lease, a permit, resolution, or any type of conveyance of land for mission sites were terminated in 1970. And it gave all churches up to 3 years to reapply and begin utilizing the mission site regulations. And so now in 2014, the land department began the drafting of the new regulations. There's a lot of changes. Also, we wanted to streamline the process. It was too lengthy, too cumbersome. We felt there were some areas that were unnecessary, such as appraisals and so forth. We figured that a lot of this could be done administratively to convey the land for mission sites as soon as possible. So in 2014, we had the first draft done, and then the general lease regulations were approved by the Secretary of Interior back in May of 2014. And in those regulations, it talks about the authority given to the Navajo Nation to develop its own regulations for religious sites. In this case, we were talking about our mission sites. And so as a result, the General Land Development Department was established in 2016 to implement the Navajo Nation General Leasing Regulations and to manage all leases, permits, rights-of-ways that were used to land withdrawals, to convey land, Navajo Nation trust and fee lands for use. So in 2016, General Land Development Department, then Department Manager Ms. Yazzie drafted the first regulations and started receiving comments. At the time, we did speak with Vice President Nez at the time and President Begay were in office, and we explained the initiative that we were pursuing. They both supported it and asked that public hearings be done in each agency and to identify all religious leaders to get their input. And so the first public hearing was done in Tuba City, and then it went to Shiprock, Chinle, Crown Point, and here in Fort Defiance Agency, and gathered a lot of comments, listened to some of the concerns, and mind you, there's still the codified version still on the books. And so the regulations was just to do the administrative changes and put them in writing, because it would take full council to redo the whole code. And so we began the public hearings, and a lot of changes have resulted from the very first draft up to the draft that we have now that we're going to discuss today, as to comments received, areas to focus on. And so that was the process that we went through, the whole aspects. And again, we took all of the public hearing information, comments, and had a meeting with the president and vice president's office at the time, and they said, okay, one more meeting. Vice President Nez said he had been in contact with some of the leaders, and they all would like to have one more meeting. So we met at Quality Inn with various different leaders and denominations to talk about the last draft of before moving it into legislation. So that meeting was conducted. We heard from all of the leaders and kind of went back to where we were in the beginning, because some were hearing it for the first time. Some of the concerns that were brought up were addressed again. So we went from a mission site to a church land use regulation. Previously, we were calling it religious site, but the comments we received was that they didn't want that title, so it was then decided to change it to church land use regulations. So after the last meeting, we then took those regulations and submitted them through the 164. Subsequently, a legislation was developed, a bill was developed, and it was sponsored by Delegate Walter Phelps from Southwest Navajo. And so it was moved a couple of times, finally got on the agenda the 11th hour, and for whatever reason, it was taken off the agenda and was not acted upon. Probably because there were still some areas that needed to be addressed, and some of those concerns came after the 11th hour. So we were able to put them in the new draft regulations. So a lot of the hearings and all of the foundational work has happened, and so now we have revised the draft regulations, put in some of the areas of concern that need to be discussed. There are some areas that we are relying on the Resource Development Committee to help us make a decision on. We've got recommendations, but we would like the committee to make those decisions so we can put the language or finalize the language, and then we're going to put it through the 164 process once again, moving forward to legislation. There are several churches that are waiting on these regulations to come into compliance. And there are a lot of support wanting the new regulations because it's going to be easier to comply with. It has extended the timeline. Mission sites normally were 5 years, and as you know, 5 years goes by fast, and then they're into the renewing. So it has expanded to 10 years in the proposed regulations, a 10-year permit with the option to renew. And through the years, we have seen churches expand, change names, and so forth, and the leaderships have changed too. So we felt the 10-year timeline was sufficient to be able to provide those services. We have also reconciled all of the old records that the Navajo Nation has had. When I say the records, we're talking about the financial documents that the Office of the Controller has listed in their financial system. All the churches that have had permits in the past, those that have been paying their annual fees, also those that have not been paying their fees. So we have all that listing, and I know GLAD has worked a lot with OOC to reconcile all of those records along with the records that they have in their possession of mission sites in the past. It's also noted that there are a lot of churches that have been established without any permits to date, and that causes some real concern for the Navajo Nation, as the president, vice president expressed to us when we first drafted the regulations of some of the things that have resulted, some of the issues that have resulted that the Navajo Nation had to address as a result of no authorization to be using Navajo Nation lands for the intended purpose of holding church services. So we'd like to bring all the churches into compliance and be able to have some terms and conditions that are all fair, as well as addressing some areas that have developed since then that the public has brought to our attention and have concerns with. And those are areas that we would like to discuss today and make a decision on, so we can move forward in our regulation. So, Chair, that is the brief, kind of a brief overview of where we started, where we've been, what we've done, and how far we've gotten, and where we are today.
Thank you, Mr. Halona, for your presentation on the church site lease regulations and the history of how things were being conducted. We also have on the call with us Honorable Aroso. Honorable So. We'll go down to B, then we'll open it up for discussions. Discussion on 2021 proposed church land use permit regulations. Proposed amendments for the 24th Navajo Nation Council and adding temporary use permits with stipulations for sanitation and medium price for residents in the permitted premises. I'll give the time over to Mr. Stephen Chischili.
Mr. Chair, this is Daniel.
Honorable Daniels.
Yeah, a very quick question, Chair. What's he tonight? This kid, yeah. I know the 23rd Council RDC, they approved the home site lease regulations. What about the church lease regulations? In that had the Maggie did. You make fun of that. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Daniels. Mr. Halona, your response, sir?
Thank you, Chair. I said, Delegate Daniels at APEN. I didn't get the knock on Ziggy in the tabaxing. He caught a quota deal, no. 2014, that boxing, he cut on Zaholis. I didn't get the I thought the other queer area. Sorry, George Caton did not that how hasn't a bond so casey get us in a baby car doctor a dog. I didn't get that. Not on Zik since the one that was in the code back in the 70s. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair. Honorable Daniels, do you have a follow-up question?
Mr. Chair, thank you very much.
Mr. Chischili, you have the floor, sir.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm going to start with a quick.
Ashwadit, Honorable Daniels.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, so, thank you, Mr. Alona, for the good, synopsis, the great synopsis of where the church land use regulations started, where they are now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cover the big key points of the church land use regulations and, the big things that we are wanting to reform and, ultimately help Navajo Nation citizens and, church-going, folks as well with these new regulations. So, to break down what the aim of the regulations are is, to simplify and expedite the permitting process for the mission site permit application. Also update the application to coincide with general leasing regulations, that were approved in 2013 and, as a follow-up, was the reason for General Land Development Department meeting. As well as eliminating the costly aspects of the mission site permitting process. For example, an environmental assessment can sometimes range up to $3,000, even for an existing mission site permit of 1 acre. This will also give home/local churches more possessory interest over the land on which the church is permitted. And doing so is, by doing so, we will give churches more time to be in compliance. 10 years will give them a lot more possessory interest and allow them to give more investments into the church and the home church areas in which they are applying for. Also, instituted the temporary land use permits for organizations that need them. Temporary land use permits for temporary institutions or use of land, which will be very similar to the land withdrawal process. And just a reminder that the regulations only pertain to the land the religious buildings will reside on, nothing to do with what happens inside or the initiatives being pushed by the church organization. Right here you have a checklist of all the documents needed for a mission site permit now. And this is a branch off of what was instituted previously through the past 40 years by BIA. Very intense and can be very hard to convey to different individuals. Different steps for a permit that will only be given for 5 years is a little intense. And so that is an intent of the reform of the regulations, as well as giving churches the ability to have a little bit more of a frugal application process by cutting it essentially in half to about 8 steps. You are omitting the environmental assessment, you're omitting the finding of no significant impact, the appraisal process, the sanitation requirement, consultation with NTUA, to boil it down to more or less what is required for a general ground lease or a land withdrawal designation. What you will have eventually will be the application, the grazing permittee consent, the survey plat, chapter resolution, petition and names, the articles of incorporation, biological resources compliance form, also known as the BRCF, and the cultural resource compliance form, also known as the CRCF. So the main areas to address for the resources committee would be the median prices for residences located within mission site permitted areas. So we understand that there are different residences located within mission site tracts. They come by different names. Parsonages is a common word. They are also there for security reasons. So usually they will be where the pastor or whoever the overseer of the mission site area is residing. And so we want to implement a way to allow for that home to be located within the mission site permitted area, but we don't know exactly what the rate should be for the tenancy of that residence inside the tract. I guess it's up to RDC today to decide of $100 per month or year is the rate for the median, the agreed upon rate, or and then what happens if there are more than one resident located within the mission site tract? Would they just have to get a home site? That is the proposal we have, and that is the advice we're giving right now, would be if there's one residence located within a mission site permitted tract, charge them rent. Otherwise, the other occupants will need to get home site leases. Aside from that, we have the temporary land use permits that will need to be decided on in the sanitation verbiage. Stipulations for mostly organizations when they're going to be using temporary spot of land for revivals, and it's temporary conveyance of land for religious reasons. This would be very similar to a land withdrawal designation. Follow the same exact process, BRCF, CRCF, and ultimately would be approved by the Navajo Land Department Manager. Essentially, it'll be a temporary permit, and it will be followed up with by and implemented by the General Land Development Department. The last thing would be delegating of the authority to the Navajo Land Department Manager 3 for mission site permits. So what we have here is just a little example of what we were talking about by homes located within churches. So as you can see, there's a church building, which is a brown roof, and then there's also a residence, the trailer, the single wide trailer located there, and then there are other different church-affiliated developments in the area. That would be one area or one example of implementing the $150 a year. Next, we have another example. This is a little bit more, well, as you can see here, there's looks like there's a holding corral or a holding pen or a small horse corral in the corner. You have a residence on the bottom left side, and then you also have the hogan located there. At one time was a residence, I believe. And so now what we are proposing is the eastern side of this square be carved out because that is the church aspect. The western side would be carved out, and that person would then get a home. So what are the benefits of the church land use regulations? Well, it would help empower home local churches with a double term of 10 years. It cuts the application requirements in half and allows the Navajo Nation to exercise more of its self-determinism and ability to make decisions in terms of what application processes are needed to get the ultimate goal of a mission site permit, as well as creating one specific direct application process for efficient processing for mission site. That way it's known across the board how to get a mission site permit, and it cuts down a lot of the different questions and comments that are needed when applying for one. It'll also encourage applicants to get into compliance with the requirements are no longer lengthy nor expensive. It allows for one residence to be established for security purposes inside mission boundaries. So here are the recommendations from moving forward. I would respectfully request for the approval of the church land use regulations. Although a new basis needed for the mission site permits be processed quicker and more efficiently through the electronic 164, which will also be more condensed as well once their implementation of the one-stop shop initiative is implemented. Once regulations are established, target the specific areas of the Navajo Nation Code, the RDC, and then so that the discussion is targeted on simplified rules. More so pertaining to the adjustment of the rental rate, omit petition and names, and cancel delegate approval, as well as strike out the need of the Secretary of Interior. So this is a two-phase recommendation. The first would be obviously getting in place the basis of the church land use regulation, and then follow up after that with the proposal to Navajo Nation Council for the amendment. That is the
Thank you, Mr. Chili. And Ms. Anderson of Basta, would you like to add anything?
Not at this time, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll leave it to Mr. Halona. He's the expert on the matter, so I'm going to.
Okay. Thank you. Honorable Key Allen Begay Jr., you have the floor at this time.
Chairman.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Chairman, I appreciate the time as well. The land department during our first initial presentation. The one thing that I really continue to make a position, Chairman, the RDC member, is I don't really have an issue or problem developing and implementing the lease process of an organization, religious organization, especially those are coming from the outside onto the nation, because we know several areas, Kodo, Bahanas, Okoko, but we have a lot of our Navajo people, and we respect to some extent where we don't need to really start dictating to our Navajo people about their religious activity, what they should have and how they should be functioning in a way. And the reason why I say this is that these are bigger organizations. These are worldwide organizations. You talk about the Catholic, you talk about the Lutheran, you talk about the Methodists, and so on, and LDS Church. So those are big organizations that function worldwide. Now, how do you even, I guess, begin to think to say that, okay, you as a bigger organization outside wants to do business or a religious activity on the Navajo Nation, these are the criteria. But then we see another building with another cross to say that, well, that's a religious building. Now we're going to blanket this whole religious regulations onto them again, which, of course, this Navajo family may not even have any affiliation. For laid like all aquajet and natural it is shorty. And that means that maybe the an individuals really don't have an understanding or don't have a distinguish of how these being outside religion are also separate in different fashion or different beliefs, different doctrine. When hate or kodo is just okay aside so the zendo aside the Bible that it asked to when she yeah, but that's but the thing is that my concern is that why are we blanketing this bigger organizations policy onto a Navajo family, and maybe it's just a family church as well, or maybe it's just something that they utilize it for a certain purpose. I mean, a lot of them maybe even have a hard time having paying their bills as well. What that hajo papa kunit and so I really need for RDC to really look at this particular document to distinguish, to say that these home church, family church, and so on really needs to be distinguished aside from these bigger organizations that wants to do the religious activity on the Navajo Nation. Now, the other area, Kodo Chairman, the Queen Bahasi, and then Mr. Helona knows about it. Late Lutheran Church and many farms in the Shni. Akoko dit abe has ani dit no by yel tiko e kola ehit ajikat because ani gito ben nishta. Well, this particular policy really, once it's approved, that the very next day that the situation in many farms at that former Lutheran Church compound would be resolved. What is? I mean, that's the question that I have. It's not being enforced or it's not being utilized out there. So since I got in, I mean, this was almost 15, 16 years ago. And then it just now became a resident of a family over there. Hawan otat kit on ni. Ko halate khila isi be bohnito hit all the chapter joke at the relinquishment. To my understanding, the Lutheran Church headquarters relinquished their operation there. Other even kaya haki a chapter which hunalia a chapter kadage hit out at the nigo at the next area ha in hik at the bete nili that what don't need no. I haven't seen the service or anything of activity since the day it was closed. Adustan eight then kat hit ahas ko elahit ela ko ake has anike ashman ano seniki. Although the other area is a cemetery, because I know some churches are being told that you got to create cemeteries. The akoko halet akuto service liniki dit e was to the nan liniki be nanil just sto kwake. Huge. But these are the areas I think we really need to focus on. And then the other thing is that I have in many farms we have a Lutheran church, we have an LDS church, we have a Baptist church, and then we have a Catholic church. Now that's another thing. Catholic church is the facility is just there. The other thing is that church a lot of them charges based on funeral service based on nayina your kid connect not shani that ego be Japanese kaya liniki arch days just even why are they some of these church organizations are charging our Navajo people to maybe I guess the main one is function of a funeral. Based on liniki hatat into ado yad liniki agent that the peso assurance kita yin bilash connect non plenada but needlessly. And even some of these cemeteries that I would add, like for example, Chinle, if you're not a registered voter in Chinle, you have to pay $300 to bury your loved one over there. Even veterans, they have to be paying a lot of these things. So anyway, I mean, there's a whole lot, Chairman. I know this is just a work session, so I think that this will be a good timing for the RDC and the land department and those others involved. And then I say that maybe, RDC really needs to sit down with these bigger organization individuals. So, hey, each community, like Jehovah Witness, they really expanded out on the Navajo Nation. Inside that compound. Home site Lisa training hadden ladona alian da ekodo one di astabiti ne eta in has loan da ekodo electricity water line not ne. And one thing that I've heard directly from the land department one time what abaha seen the has religious dan linigi da it o kodo anit be kaya bit after kodo to I don't water line the power line but what the snow baha seen the trade na be base of the whole no need so you do have to. So I guess money is just the main thing that people looks at, or the Navajo Nation government is looking at, rather than just having these services being available to the Navajo people by these organizations. And then the other thing too is that in some areas, like for example, again, mini farms. Last year or 2 years ago, you that escado, the PPE, the do. Ado chiyan the no the hobaya that you hard shot that is station you We are in the midst of this community service, but they need ye out don't need what is their commitment? I think that's the reason why I'm asking all these church organizations headquartered there, what is their real commitment to the community aside from them, their doctrines, their religious purpose, but but on the side, they still have some social responsibility. How do they help the community? How do they help improving the community? We see some churches providing AAA programs or something of that nature, counseling. Halit Allah Sator, Nandinikishan, because Odat, Koto, Aquagin, Dishnastado, Koto, base of Indo, Listo, Odat, Teo, Koto, Nan Satango, Gonda, Koto, Kayapa, or peso, that's in his Hinashit, on other hearts, or she peso, yan, or can they. For that, Chairman, so again, if you need to, if the land department RDC needs to go back out to many farms and really make it an eye visual assessment of the situation that I'm talking about, that's so if that situation is my community, and I'm sure the rest of the community across the Navajo Nation are probably in a similar situation as well. Chairman, so I hope I'm making myself clear. Like I said, I'm not posing implementing the policy, but I think there's a big problem that we have across the Navajo Nation on this particular issue. As an individual, as a belief, it's just a matter of how we function. Additional chairman, so I'm hoping I'm making myself clear. But otherwise, so I make this. I guess I want to make be on record making this statement and comments, Chairman. So otherwise, I need to go back into my other meeting as well. So nonetheless, I appreciate the time, Chairman.
Mr. Halona, your response, sir.
Che, Delegate Begay, Yate Ado, and I didn't see the Quigo Sinking. That was good, no. I caught Taggy area. The hot egg. Many farms, they're hot. The query behind the query isla emails and isla. Did that say? Did say? Hela at the Nila that the Bacao out on his isla. So chapter which isla. Oh, did Yabba has only got. Atel nagi eot asabits. Beninani kadigi has ani holonigi edo hagedahot abakata. Beninata hot ehegidot a honnitligi cut. A hot ehegi honebitahi so. A co that nistadina. A co what section 10. Proposed regulations, section 10, good night, but car trespass. A hot in ho hot in Hate ass in Ado law nana hana hot in Ado Edo cannot in hana hot in Joe what at the case the hot. A co by young Lutheran Church at Don Nation deed. ako ado chapter di ya ado le kede ato shit what nata ne datan thousand se what di li khela bayan skela say that and by basically hanada that nan post the number 8 of the address again khela ako bahazan kwa hot or nitro Ado churches, cemetery, but the nini hodla khashin a hoit nishan hodla. And she kodo do hota basta hoil net the do hota bacha. Yatel kit the hota cemetery ton or state of the need the churches. Nlego da and das nila hota sahonle toha Catholic Church de hota. Nle Emmanuel Mission, Sweetwater, the others, those la hota. Ado ya sahot the Christian what ataho la sahot the chita os how I had that been look at that that either in a chapter that is in any chapter saho what ya the resolution that you learn since your policy da no I con the DOJ the queer the sing it the whole net Anni bayan chigi ad chin lead anni na kitamo ata da sentla hota da holne Jelo de nenda edo kwa na atanda ko $315 la hota ya totni ako DOJ biche nasishla email gi di job khadna behaz ani ha ibqa bish qutidna fatishno alo ashe hon washne to chapter manager but hasti tahalla so hota da and the query the shin DOJ who chapters ni che ta ilan what peso de no KD ado da en beka ako ya chirina na chutol in so go shin ya cast be ka as la khida kad not da so ka to ko ti do be as la shin shin de ya Ken tolge chot tabti ni ado aaj bahaz ani do kat the quid is traffic ta area do worst session dashan asa na kedashan na area yat another ni koton is how ya ben yes na ne kleto burial regulations what to ni chota di ni so jo hojo bahazan to bahazan da to qadiyata il inigi بكهودا دي نيكتودا بهز أني جو هدا دي نيشتا دي نيد أكو هدا أكو دي تكودا نيجي جو آدوشين خات شيء السيدة يا كيا هجين هي هدا يي آسن ده إن ليجو patent ده نو هدا كيا بهدا هاستو بتشي هدا ليا Aro because which ya never Washington and hinting he kaya on hip because no into hit out as into les Asian bin nation has on Italia. PIA in Kayos was na hona ako ebe has on because Alia at the nenle appraisal the Aro petition of names the Edigin tato kasnacha taheto tonan ago chapter na zindo le chapter resolution they let the in this ako church nas nili yit kha natcha to hasida sitinda nish what ako young kato chata da but ningle she hota spas and do the christian la covid ya dan da has woto chiyan dan da is net kodan da is go hota spas and kota ako angi kan da chahota pas nigi ako digi she kota go gi da ya alno da ta pa to ni no do yo bayan hota da ya bansen ke to hota da to ni ne ado akun ni da yo yedi do da church a de legi arbitral da jo what got $15 a year per acre jo hat ne ako Asian ya to alnida to ta hotel na ta on late 1970 ya ta hota council ye last clean da do hotel ta hota del ni ta di na di ho wan de ni gi hon ya ta has not ni gi ani o kaligi ba has ani to ba hot ta to be do de yan to be land or late ta jo konden his ba has them church owners no since got they dot sisto we go hat they dot Asian bini na ahu ba now ke da hat ahu ba gan ta yi la khan ji ya ta hal ya Asian hot abini na akho ya ban si ke so ya asa hot aho wan no sin akho iketas in to ahu ist ara ba hun eto ana hot e o ta e khar ara church church o ta kha akwa ba gan ho de to ni sin to akon de jut nesta egi homeside list ken da illa hegi ke be ken da illa aje jutan even na ba ka as la ba to ni la ko ya o da illa ta beti ni do le asta so be la ho ni illa hegi ab la ho da illa ta beti to ni sin o da illa do le juta di ni ako to propose ge 150 that the that safe yada that 150 ya to recommendation gi hunne bi da sit so at hun sage ako what on ni le church di da se to di down da sto le si anan a honne hit a sin dan sin do ha sin ta do le yan sta case anan ako an ke ko jid na da il engine da a hote hat khalisti ta an le ko jon le a do di da sta da but da ni li at si got at to a hota ban sa ha kes ako a sin pe ya e da des I to hota atas khalati articles and incorporation hat no aiden nende ni that des in ako ha ge da do ko ta sin but da hotna the board na halon as niligi kwage di te kwage do hot da jo hat ni di sin hot ta sin a say de do listo hot a jo ta o listo faz angot ako ahon so sin ya sa nan alo le check go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Halona. Honorable Begay, do you have a follow-up question?
Chairman, well, basically, like I said, I could request a slide. You maybe speak directly to the organizations and they then put a go ahead. Schedule the date, yeah. Chairman.
Kushila. Honorable Begay, could you clarify that request there? The organization again, is it with the Lutheran Church that you're talking about?
All these bigger organizations, the Catholic Church, the Baptist Church, the LDS Church, any bigger organization, maybe like the Jehovah's Witness, their main headquarter organizations, directors, Chairman, I want to request that.
Okay, Joshi, we'll have Mr. Tahi look into all these churches, these bigger organizations versus the smaller family churches and see what we can work out with them. So, we have in the queue Honorable Edmund Yazi, Honorable Daniels, and then Honorable Aroso. So, Honorable Edmund Yazi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair, committee members, everyone that's listening online. Also, Mr. Halona, thank you for your presentation. On this work session, committee members, I've tried to notify our pastors, and hopefully they'll join the call as well since it's a work session. But on behalf of the churches that is within our area, and I'm hoping Mr. Freeland can help too as well on this issue, because First Navajo Baptist Church in Crown Point, there's a Black Hat Church up in Yatahe area, and other numerous churches have pastors have been asking about their lease. They are worried, and we have one elder pastor that is in his statement, he is ready to go home to be with the Lord, but he is worried about the church lease because he wants the lease to be valid, and he wants the mission to continue on and teaching the Bible to our people. Now, my colleagues, you are all aware that throughout my whole life, my late dad was a pastor, and all my life I was forced to go to church, and I still go through my late parents, and I thank them for that. But I remember my dad told me when I was going into tribal leadership, and my late father said to me, son, um, this tribal council is a whole different area that you have never been involved in with our people. And my dad stated, to me, because if you win your election, son, remember, don't put down any other beliefs, and such as any, you stay as humble. Yes, you grew up in the church, but you stay humble. And that's where I'm coming from, my committee members. I am pleading with you on behalf of the pastors members that we moved with this legislation, that Mr. Halona and his staff, who are experts in these issues, that we move forward with the lease, because it's been long, way too long, ever since Walter Phelps was on the council. And so that's what, almost 4 years ago. And so I remember Speaker Bates wanted to finalize all these legislations before this council came in, but we fell short. And so I asked, on behalf of the churches, everyone, and I know every church is different, okay? In within our district, I've heard Key Allen Begay's churches, but within our district, our churches are out there giving wood, and I heard Chairman Nez stated that he has a Catholic organization that helps his community. That's the same way with us with St. Bonaventure's, tremendous education to our young kids, and so. And I'm just pleading, committee members, please. And I was just hoping that our pastors would join us, but I believe that they might be busy with their daily schedule. I go to church as you go onto I-40. There's two elders. One is Tommy Hino. He's our church elder from Coolidge. And then you have another crazy individual that is, I'm proud to say, that is a church elder. This crazy person, his name is Edmund Yazi. And so I just ask again, my colleagues, and we do have a Navajo pastor from Lupton, and his name is Ted Goodluck, and he teaches Navajo and English, and so mainly Navajo to our elders. And so please, committee members, I'm asking, let's move forward. I appreciate Mr. Halona's work on this, and he has explained to me this whole lengthy process. And so, on behalf of the churches that are waiting for their leases, without having them worried of what's ahead in the future, let's lock that in for these pastors. And I'm pleading with the committee members, Mr. Freeland, please help, and Mr. Daniels, Mr. Walter, I'm asking, for your help, Mr. Begay, too, as well. on this important issue on church leases. So, Chair, that is what I have to say, and I'll go ahead and put myself back on mute. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman Yazzie. You didn't have a question, but you did make a supporting statement for churches and to have these regulations move forward. So that will be well noted. We also have in the queue next, Honorable Daniels.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Kodo, Arenda Kodo, RDC Kodo, members, Arenda Kodo, 24th Council colleagues. Kodo, Dino Flaggy, Arenda Kodo, Navajo Land Department, Ajuda in Michigan. Arenda Shell Kahasni, Dino Flaggy, Kodo, Kodo, Ekishin Dahil, Adonana Kodo, Nagay church site, mission site regulations. Khatal neto nana ikodo has anishin il neto lesako. Kuyoshi bahna ide kito nana kuyoshi bahna ide kit kodo. Ako ani hot enagay kodo should say oyu yahat zi kodo delegate ki alambike. Nagay tahus ago ani hot what the hot o nago da had to see that hot hot but now oyu da one ako. Called church abeda there's about Gansaho, a corner gate of that other the Kodo and the gate Ako wheat in Kodona gate Navajo Nation. The great home site lease regulations, enforcement, they keep on then. A craggy, go back in how I don't know, a craggy. Now hold the Sokodo. Base of the Hoyet or let us show. AOE Ban's case or so did in a great when the home site lease regulations was approved by 23rd RDC. But on a great enforcement, the gate of the Solante. I got this street that put the enforcement keep on hot then. Quaggish a yego. Though I see Yan and Harden Hallanako. But now it's a wonder. Bansada, Baba Sanda, we lego, home site leases one Sanda, we lego. What that, got that. I don't know, Kodo, great and official now, yes, and even I should go. I should have bought one Senaco. Yego, but this enforcement again. I got did Honana Honada let a good for you about such case good. He added Hadagat or Lee the great church now, Melico. But Hadawi Soshi, oh, Hadawi Soshi, a core. But not the Sniggy, because should now be husband be there, Mr. Halona. The great in Monument Valley, there's there used to be a church. Adonana, there used to be a school. Adonana Quadodam, Adam, hospital, Dayeshi, and Desto. The great Monument Valley, 7th Venice, Dahineto, the Quishinache, Leaf Behelon. I don't know she be, I don't know, that lease expired, 3 years ago, so they were there illegally. Got enforcement. But over Hanoda. I don't ego. Heat. I don't know the peso. That's about Bahana. But Hanadi. So Craigie Yego should be Aquado. A conagay enforcement. Again, I don't Aquado. Or yet on his Kahonich, Hadi, it's was in a great 7th Venice when they were here. I don't know we found out that there was no lease. They were there without a lease for the 3 years. I don't know that they did some improvements. ko da do le kin da sa da yi la le ko e de ko do na ge den he ga dit ai we pe pe da ne pe ne ko da fra hot lande au e ke ha gi do ri che hona yi la do kin ba ka na li do ri che hona yi la so Craigie dam Ajoy the Hahamid, wait out the Chosha Benegate and a great Gouldings area. A dam Mr. Alone, Abashbahal, Kado, Koya Hashil Koya, Hika, another watch to Ajo, Hanat Dato Yen, Hit Nahazme, De Nada, least no that Yen Hit Nahazme Heko. So when 70 Venice was here, Ita Ecuador, Dam, hospital, was Ita. I was born there. Ita back in the 60s. And I just sit in Chenho, the Manama Valley. So, Adiki Kodona Gaita, I just English of the Gaita within the leaf that they Hawanda trailers that now not that for a Kodon the Sigipa, but Karina and not. And I create the rate of that organization, Nevada Utah Conference. They the 70 events. That's their main corporate office. They the rate of Sarha decision Nevada Utah Conference. They don't jigo ka. So Craig how nature shadow that to this stage the neck Craig that all they're there without at least they're there without a home site lease or one or not medical. Either great and official not necessarily either. Coco Codona great Baba Hinani Kashi don't let Jiggy. So that ego the great up. I think the great that is Agoshi so that the great church is going to have slogi. You see that Kate had aircon. The Christian one not the house. So it is quite a bastion medical. So it is only to man on the enforcement again. So it is at Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Daniels. Your concern with enforcement. Even what Honorable Begay had mentioned at many farms, enforcement is needed. Perhaps during the budget sessions, we could look for some funding somewhere and have a person look at how home site leases as well as church site leases are being abused in some way. So, Honorable Daniels, thank you for your concern and bringing this to our attention. Next in the queue, we have Honorable Otto So and then Honorable Freeland. Honorable So, press star 6.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I appreciate the presentation. Earlier, I was trying to unmute my phone. But, Mr. Shinan, Mr. Helona, thank you for this thing. And I know that Land Department's been working on this for many, many years. And but the main goal, I think, Shinan, is to create some sort of policy to be put in place, and which is modernized from what the current policy is that BIA has formulated for us for many, many years ago. Through the Leasing Act, approve it, and we don't have to go to BIA no more. But in lieu of that, if you were to package everything together for this church site lease at this time, would you feel comfortable to say that this is a workable document that could be pushed through the the that, or we could introduce legislation to start this dialogue, because ako taat aron na ito to hadit ada pahint o paniyat it ananasha and so forth. And now they're talking about, it sounds like they want to waive fees. And but there's a reason for those fees, you know. And in lieu of that too, there was one discussion when I was at land department, was to reroute all the leasing dollars from the home site and the business site leases to allow land department to have a proprietary account and use those dollars to hire enforcement compliance officers, so that they can get home site leases or church site leases or even business site leases into compliance. No, to the chon the ada so ya na ada so so what is it to the chon ya na ada go that comes the ISO what happened. I know the other about the housing thing inside the leasing policy. I think maybe something that's movable. I know that they have permanent churches that they build, but if they choose to live on the church site lease, that give probably put into the policy that a mobile home to live in the hotness is movable. That way, the individual who has a church site lease will not lose anything major. They can take that mobile home when he or she is done there with the property. But again, I appreciate everything. Thank you.
Thank you. To Honorable So, Nedina, Sitsala Honesa, Honorable Begay. Yel Tkit, Nisa. I say, Nehota. The Shin job I yell Tkigibin na yell Tkisa. Job and Chike, so Arotisha Quahanat, a deal about your snatla. Deal a quaggy, based Edo, lately, she Winston, Ninigishi Dale, a work session. A coahot by us, Kito, we do need to move forward on this. Shard betan hadit, I had legislation bidit, Ninigi Hadelia, Roshin Bikeda, Nedaha Nil, so Goshin Hate, Ankeban, so Keso, amendment at all sale. A conas for all, Nil Dida, Shanant, not Seniki. I guess at the Quaid is lane. Nasa 3 years is Leila Kuja by El Tiko. So Kashin Nasbet Elne. Today, final though, late work session by Hadid, Zehadon need a call. Ashin Yahot Edel little by El Tiki. Pardon his art, Elna don't laugh at what again hit in their hands to Goshin. Sa church on dark, Hedohit Ashin, be his Ani and Al Nesto, up at the doctrine is Nathan. Up at the doctrine the Hadlohite Ashin Ishin Al Nashiki. So it is what I had this. Honorable Freeland, you have the floor.
Hagoshi, Ahialanshant, colleagues, Notlinigi, good morning to my other colleagues, my older brother, Honorable Yazi, and Shana Otto, Honorable Paul Bigay, and Shana, Honorable Otto. So thank you for joining this call, as well as my RDC colleagues, Notlinigi Otto staff. Good morning to all of those. And Ms. Abeda, good morning. It's good to hear your voice. Thank you for representing Eastern Agency well at DOJ. Colleagues, Notlinigi staff, Chairman, in regards to the discussion at hand and what Mr. Halona and what Mr. Chichili presented, are we going to have any sort of grace period established for the missions or the church leases to get into compliance? Are we going to have any sort of grace period established? Are we going to waive any sort of fees or any sort of rental or any sort of financial agreements during that grace period if we do have one? And are we gonna also have any sort of I guess, how are we gonna deal with the situation if we have a mission or church site on a home site lease? How do we deal with that type of scenario? Is that listed in the legislation as well, or potential legislation? And then finally, who's gonna sponsor this legislation? I'm sure it's gonna be chairman, but RDC will take the lead, of course. But if you are chairman, I'd like to co-sponsor as well. I just think we need to give some sort of grace period to this mission, the missions and the churches, to get within compliance of these leases. If that's not already established or if that's not already in place at this time, Chairman Shinatai. And I appreciate this discussion at hand, and I appreciate my brother, Honorable Kiel Miguel, bringing up the larger denominations as well. I was raised Catholic, so I understand what he's talking about. And, understandably, for all denominations, especially the larger ones that have money, can be, more influential, I guess, to get this done. So area, and then how do we help out the smaller denomination, and how do we help out the smaller independent churches, AEG, to get in compliance? Are we going to have any sort of not marketing, but we're going to have some sort of way to get them? Are we going to put the word out to get the word out to help them get in compliance? Are we going to have some sort of media outreach to them? And and then, of course, then we have to figure out how we're going to deal with the situations on Eastern. Another avenue is, of course, how we're going to deal with all those denominations or churches that are on allotted lands as well. That's involving the BIA. Are we going to go that far with this legislation? Are we going to include the eastern portion or eastern allotments on this legislation? So, yeah, Chairman, those are the questions that I have this morning. I don't know who could answer those, but just some thoughts. And of course, Mr. Yazi, my older brother, asked for his assistance, and I'll be glad to help any way that I can. But I also have those questions as well, colleagues and Thinigi, staff, and everyone on this call. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Freeland. Ado Naidens, Kitiki, Ato Kuroshi, Mr. Mike Halona, as well as Mr. Chishchili. Mr. Chishchili, to respond.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Delegate Freeland. There, in the initial work session we had in December, I believe we suggested a grace period of either 90 or 180 days to self-report for these churches that are out of compliance, or they feel that they're not up to date on their compliance or their permits. And that could be added, I believe, to the legislation, that they could self-report. And then to your second question regarding what to do when there is a church located within a home site lease or vice versa, the answer would be, well, it needs to be distinguished whether or not they're affiliated with the church, or how much they're implemented into the mission site permitted tract. If it's like a parsonage or security reasons why they're implemented or put within the site of mission site tract, then they could fall under the regulations. The part on the regulations about them having to pay $150 a year to reside in that location. Otherwise, if there's more than one residence located within a mission site tract, and then they'll have to be carved out, and home site leases will then have to be pursued. I believe there will be a public announcement, probably sponsored by land departments or some overseeing authority, when the legislation does process, and I think that's it. I believe that was your question. Back to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chishchili. Honorable Freeland, one other question that you asked is, who's going to be the sponsor? The sponsor has not been identified yet, but Honorable Edmund Yazi is requesting to be the sponsor, and any of my colleagues can be the sponsor as well. Whoever wants to step up, you're more than welcome to be the sponsor. I would rather have you as my colleagues be the sponsor of this legislation. So, Honorable Freeland, do you have a follow-up question?
Chairman, thank you. Shanant. Okay, thank you for that acknowledgement, Mr. Chichili, and I appreciate it. If we can extend it to 180 days, that would give amp time to have all of our churches and all of our mission site leases get in compliance. And then how are we going to deal with allotments? Or are we going to deal with allotments? Are we going to get involved the BIA on the allotment side? How, we want to make sure that we also extend. Is there any way we can include language or request to the BIA how we're going to deal with the allotments?
Honorable Freeland?
Yes, Chairman.
You broke up there. We didn't hear what you said, so could you restate what you just said?
I'm sorry. I was talking about the allotments, Chairman. How are we going to deal with the allotments and Eastern Agency? So, but I appreciate it. And if Honorable Ibn Yazi is going to sponsor the legislation as well, that's good and that's fine. But I just want to ask who would be taking the lead on this, Shunt. Thank you.
Mr. Halona Haroche. Chair, members of the Resource Development Committee, Delegate Freeland. Good morning. As far as the allotments are concerned, those would be totally up to BIA as to how they're going to handle it and what they're going to do. I don't know if they have any mission site or religious leases that they issue. They might just do a standard temporary permit, or they may just come up with a lease for them, especially if the lottees are on their own allotments. I guess it's their own land, so they can decide as to how they're going to handle it. These regulations will be for trust lands and fee lands, is what we're moving towards. And while I got the floor, I just wanted to respond to a couple of comments. Delegate Daniels, had COANI enforcement. CARES ARPA funding. Budget I call for the next at least 3-4 years. We're gonna get some compliance officers. For the timeline that we had to meet, we didn't have enough time to develop a position that says land compliance officer. So we just called them home site agents. Upon the job description, it's geared for someone to go and check on these complaints, do the investigation, get all the facts together, and make a recommendation to us as to what needs to happen. So, and as a result of no enforcement over the years, we have not only home site issues, but the number of churches that are out of compliance, cell towers that don't have leases. There's a lot of different issues going on. We probably actually need 2 compliance officers in each agency to address it all. Our Delegate So mentioned that we're supposed to set up some type of revolving account to use the money. That we started working on that, and then when they separated, the land department and general land development was established. General land development is where the big money comes in for rights of ways, TAAs, cell tower payments, all of that. Millions come in, and maybe they can grab some money from that side to also hire some compliance for all the leases and stuff that they are issuing. So we'll have 2. That would be my recommendation. Home site leasing amount doesn't amount to the threshold needed to develop a fund. It's not that much that we bring in. We bring in some, but not
They were telling us we need at least 250,000, and we're under that. But I'd like to comment about maybe making sure that these residents are removable, because a lot of these churches change, congregations change, pastors change. It's evolving, so it's not. I guess the only one is if it is owned by the church itself and not the people, it would be the ones that would remain at the site. Go at that. And so those residents that have churches, as Mr. Chichili mentioned, we would help them split up the mission site and then put the other resident site on a home site lease, and then they'll be in compliance. And so thank you for this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Halona. Honorable members of RDC, do you have any other questions? Honorable Freeland, you're more than welcome to be the main sponsor. Honorable Chairman Edmund Yazzie said he's more than willing to be the co-sponsor also.
Chairman, thank you. Chairman, thank you. I would defer to my colleague, Honorable Yazzie, if that's the case, or yourself. I just wanted to ask who is going to be the sponsor. I can be a co-sponsor, that's fine. And I do have a follow-up comment, Chairman, to Mr. Halona.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Halona, thank you. Is there any way, Mr. Halona, that we can incorporate language in this legislation that speaks to the BIA in regards to allotments? If they can, I don't know what maybe this is probably a prelude to what you had mentioned as far as what is their regulations or leasing requirements like. Is it something comparable to the nation? Do they require lease payments as well? If that's the case, if they require lease payments, how much are those lease payments? And how can we mirror the request to the BIA for the Navajo Nations? I don't know if that can be done or if that's something that we can speak to BIA about, but just to try to help out the allottees. But if they don't have a lease, an allotment lease requirement payment, that's fine too. We could just leave that alone. But if there's something that they're charging, maybe that's in excessive of what we're going to propose, maybe we can add this to them and say, can you all abide by this? Or can you respectfully, we ask that you comply or ask that you take a good look at this legislation as well. I don't know, just something to think about, I don't, Mr. Halona. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Freeland. Mr. Halona.
Thank you, Chair, and Delegate Freeland. Appreciate your comments and thoughts and questions. Most certainly we could talk to BIA and being uniform pretty much, I think, would be something that we would propose to them, as that, because some of the pastors may be on trust land and then they go to allotment, there's another church there. But the only difference would probably be I don't think they ask for chapter resolutions. I don't think they ask for the petition of names. They do that with their consent. So if the nation has interest in that allotment, they'll say Navajo Nation. And then we give consent. They do that in all leases and rights of ways and so forth. So the nation, we would consent to a church being issued a permit or a lease, and then they ask all kinds of questions like they do a home site. Are you okay with the 35-year lease? We always say yes. What's the rental? We always put waive. We don't charge them any rent on their own land. We just have interest. But in the homesite lease regulations, there is a section there that says that in the event that the Navajo Nation obtains 100% interest in an allotment, once their residential lease expires, then they have to get a Navajo Nation homesite lease. and we have that in the home site lease site. So it'd be the same with any other improvements. If it's a church, whatever permit or whatever authorization that they were given, when it expires and it's 100% Navajo Nation owned, then they would come and get a Navajo Nation permit or lease for their improvement on that previous allotment. I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halona, for your response. Honorable members of RDC, any other comments or questions? Just
Mr.
for
Chair,
your information. Okay, go ahead, Honorable Daniels.
Ako hot inagayta aro lebe la before the local level ako di home at least regulations to keep what public here jiban da stand ako the nagayta Western region say to is because I do in me as I say hinge mean and how it given what the yeah the hot na great tibe the he best to make sense but the job has on is make given na great public hearing that's Italia in found Baban just case got detailed the quick by years piki shananta amashta ko so that has no equator in kitchen dot asking a great banash great chapters I own that this kid. I 11 I don't his home net so hot is when I home site lease regulations what's that either greatness so I had and yeah something I but it's I not the I got it or yeah on it or let's go it down here at the local level as I see I don't know got change or name that or change got Belati so legislation hela sponsor ille idol lisa nil mean te pakodo besabendo iya oi an honst adide oi sant honst adide alfa azoba hotilne azoda never spare husband orle adonana I see should be ababanta case kodo because all your churches now in the did the quick was in old J to a lot of them the son to Safikin. Yesterday was in Safikin. I don't know other communities throughout the Navajo Nation. Maybe what we should do is invite pastors and Lenigita as well baby in the hotels. Then I get when air was I don't hit about hot shit. I am in the hotels so it isn't the hotels. Na great the has Nagi Pescadon, a great pastor and Lenigi. The great Equator Bella, Equator regulations again, the Nashiko, but the spare husband all this. The Nashiko show husband all this. 7 years, the snotty, Mr. Chair. Called so Hasida ban for case husband to a what aban case got us not Senigi Akoda. Good as not see case the snake at the Nagapesa, Beslas and Neat Lenigi Ado Yale Pigit Ado, the last not Yale Pig. A Cosayo, ye, the indeed, low yes at all. We have get at the need at the same time as that gas pedal oya certificate deal the ended oya get at the nail is I don't have seen if ended lorry busy is so of course I would need I did I don't know that is as in the way that should have been as a gas pedal deal is the nail it's as ago هذه كده هذا هذا تشخص محل كده توست نيت هو فإذا كان هزوس تديل نيت هو هزو كده باخد ديل نه so hot $8 so I don't know if there was ever done without a that would be a question to Mr. Halona without Mr. Chair on $8 thank you.
Honorable Daniels for that concern and Mr. Halona, your response, sir.
Terminus, hello, hello, Silu, Nidens, Kiddy. The net at the Hon, Nini, for the office of the President, Vice President. Open that there's Nisha Don Draft as young, Dinen Zauni. But yati ino tra ako ya hum nebeche dol nistati ni hotza ako le Western Agency Tuba City yeah assassin ako this budget yi lagi about 180 assassin Asian age pastor dan lini bishop dan lini sin igen besade da nigi do bespata hazini do yen dan tinigi leaders in the has as far away as Durango, Phoenix, all over sin sista hal now bespata hozen Ako ta hos angi to na sausage hota ya hota ba hal kedo di ta we il kha he kwaige ga do hot da to so di ta to list ta no hota asa chen hota isn't that hasil now hota ban si khay ako sin na has le church sin ya handa khai sin isa hodna di ta na ako sa ho ya to joy ke da ti ta o to ta de ya ne khan ni tsa has on it natural to ba hun ti da disna ti keya hagi bit hol na ki hate na shin Quite chapter resolution. Biological, cultural, land withdrawal. Best ego. At all, Nicho Hota that has only Hatadilia. Enforcement, oh, na bit the seats of in Nani, but Bahatanda. Ako atati. Ako Sahod Nahata Hilo comments today in the yeah. That need has it on Nancy Tina Bahal Day Latins and Shintla. What are you going to make us put the president and vice president's picture inside our church? That no, the Hatahatsi. A Koanan, like Ebert Han and the East Slant and the Highland. Diba has only had the yagi just cow. Home site lease application. Land withdrawal regulation by land. Church land use. Tribal code be sohogi no. Akoti adotza kanan agi chehetes inigi ajit ya ndika Ako da sabani na the question to so hot but least that temper permit that step. Akonde ada mo na atle ada chita os. Ako opa has kige. Et liability or yagi. Ban saha case or jo hot esto. Ako ebeni na din sa gondo kasan. On the Baba Yate, Delegate Yazi. The question, but Nahal, church, I thought the youth cup has only. I thought it's not Nini, the youth cup, Yata, cancel done his natural. I call what I saw hot long, cancel island, yes, on that machine done and stop. Don't I go to Kaya, I get a pound. Alo bị vấn nè họ vấn ta giờ đây ya cái đó ní số hạt nè ya cái đó ní alo enforcement gì số đó ní số hạt đó ní ako what ako alo Chinley Shipwreck Crown Point Eastern Agency en le bakade are nahas kai phải the question on here ke khata khaho le shipwreck da nasta edo khoto hata hasti hallo jo haila ta to ne da lo da hashke di ya da ke ya hato zo ke ya da hal ne do ba has ani ilne da no nason khayata ki ad when nani ge eti ta ni tra ta asle in sklanan hi tra hasin ta osle ta no da ye khista halna edo khot eda ako ya khotsa ako di and kaitsenel ako what tsela delegate Daniel what ship Tuba City they are on the other Sagi de ya hum ke khati ada ed never but the hasil ne to in la hasne to aden khatsa tolzen ye gota en gito ni din juno oxelan gito ni do a hot he sto hata hasti od a ko che
Mr. Alona Corona Tahnenzi Arishnan Anathenegi, honorable members of the Resource and Development Committee. Do you have any other comments or questions? Honorable Aroso.
Yeah, thank you again. And yes, you when the church is formulated off the reservation. Georgia has aniki dashin sago. The bear has ani the hallo. Ado bikeho dosta. Dosta. But that nail what ego the bear has ani at the hallo. Ako Nishicho ya anan tahiye do. I used to work at the land department. We had churches that do not have leases in place. Oh, that ahnet, oh, ajet, and you find out that there's a congregation. But when you look at the liability issue, so these set of rules and these principles, these guidelines are something that should be put in place. I don't there's the homestead lease amendment that policy that was placed that was passed. I don't think the worked at that office, and prison officials were really, really, really drilled with it. Hospital that he thought they don't want to change even now. Alcohol, this is the same case. And I think that somewhere the legislation just needs to drop it and get it going and see where it goes, because you have to have some sort of policies in place. So you have church leases that are still that are pending because of name change issue, because there's no policy that's updated, and I don't that these churches, so they end up going off and acquiring more building outside their their lease area. So this is a good thing, is the amendment considered in the legislation? I think we really need to move on this. And I appreciate Honorable Yazi and Honorable Freeland for stepping up to get this legislation moved forth. The land department had this document for many, many years, and I think we need to move forward.
Akushila here, Araba Heinzege, Honorable So. Ado, Sunant Anachlenike, Honorable members of RDC. The aim, the goal of these regulations, Agia, Aita Eya Behes Ani Hollo. Hot end the on dog, Asiki Etida, Sunant Anachlenike. Data sanal chos ne daronil chos 816 god kefona abe lana itle data leasing. And then the chanholia che bija 8 ketash ishige. A copen yahat enige yesa. Simplify and expedite. Donan ago aro onas beil neko atskinsko. The process to get permits, but mission site lease, church site lease, fit ocean bay need jiggy, egg yedon and abado length benniga. Ado con ha data application get update at that ordinary. A ha general leasing regulations koji enad nishigi, Journal Land Development Department enad nishigi. Betekest edo lesbeniga. Ado konege yaha eliminate costly aspects of the mission site permitting. 3,000 but a hadn't data environmental assessment jan which ago. Donan agobado lesbeniga. Ado that give home local churches more possessory interest over the land on which the church is permitted. Deden lata kennas nele bige gonna chohodes and donan tiniki digin bazade that net kinki appehande basalado let ajahit ashin ye horsas ala Ado Honorable Edmund Yazi in Nela Shajar Hoshidini, the Nebanat Anison Lenko, Ohodinson humility or Ligahege Behatan Ashitoni. I don't that the Nebe or Latin Lenigi Arabe Banant and at all Lechdini Nela. A cohort Ehigishit Atida, to by khanate in the to les ne or la hot edo to be hot the neskin the ka and the the okait all the kensa ange church site lispa donant ago nal chospa hadal ido lehige aida public hearing das le Adoti compliance baha o jigi ne hona istoto le johotoni. Ado recommendation iki yaha kodo anela dida behes ani church land use regulations hatnenigi nas kodo le akoe donant adado le sto nage based on change case begin now 164 process again review el indo le aronaski den data le a codibe has ani eliado be kere sto hajodi be has ani nan ingo khagi lai hajo national tahadotzo tadatsibitotzo hogishi benahit ado le a codisha be dana hadit I had the liado shin to a wheel either le jordan in a codi hot ashenant and not leni aro is not anki de a benebie a cock at ane na 2014 yada te bina khada bit as nestop and had a honzako for the Chepinach 8 years is lay proposed amendment sige a joy yan sidas case on bata did again beside in that Tennessee pastors do bishops do height ashin dauch reverend shindan lord up that nasa a hodat a hege evangelist a she bestahon ne what edabat on ne do yaha ad be ho sasagin he doctrine ke be neat in da jobat on asate a koti kwage be has ani did the church dan liki height all leasing kit have hajo hast adol net hat nenegit abat on ne go besen da hasna bekiada esa sashiada hajoik that trada hot on his church be lwatna hot on hisna Asiatisness separation of church and state igi bedat is hot on holle le goshin huinzen akor did hot on his be his not chinahuna relation and I not senigiro is not age aroshan and I satosh pahnana jitida naidos kidat a cook a did coron hasnaki number 4 gunnes agenda because we last or need linigi nan hisnda hasnet up on the ideal kidiki a shena sto lesiki photo ha honorable Daniels ya ji un errors that's equito after hostability needs no ya ji Mr. Halona, I know I had that public hearing that is need over better husband. He get at it, huh? Each agency goes into that in an even nature. A quag is a what a relation and I'm not seniki. A co on a radar what it needs, say that I say glad that December 21st. I had a sanadi place to the nil is to nasbet il neti nil khaiji a kunde chuk abain skala ashin hot abe has ani khadod nil to ara hol just the shin ne daton nil go amendments be horsonde na hot it ocean and nothing. So the recommendation is to move forward on this to have a legislation drafted. And when this comes before the Resources and Development Committee, amendments can be made at that time. Adoshin church dan nelishin da east shin da let height in hinan dan lenige yen da arot height de da let dan san shin da let so he nan da asad an ana slash ba hat si da ba shin naidos kit at den ya akoshila johan chago kilna da hasil netla.
Mr. Chair, this is Delegate Daniel.
Honorable Daniels, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was muted. But could Bahanade the out end. So Abit Ahmad for the record. So legislation had the negative Ahmad Shad. The Nebet the Nebet Eastern Alps and Arole. So that's my point today. Kokodo, Mr. Halona Kodoya Kodo public hearing. Adonana Kodo Jonagit Equatida Adonana Kodo Oiba Bad or in out or but Kodona Greta moving forward, Kodona Greta, the legislation. Yeah, this is a good legislation, but we really need to inform our Navajo people. Kodo, in this case, Nagay pastors and Linigi, Donana Halnedra Eda Ecuador. I know that Nagay next month planning meeting, chapter meeting. Without my husband a year, not the dog kill. Has it I don't kill Hashmet. The door Nisi Halot at either. I don't know the yard, Lana Shilla. Not no send the but Nicodo. Nagay the net. So us indicate for Otla. Ajoda, so us indicate a but the snatida. The bay. A could up a husband or less. It has only could on that Arthaki. As in 1970s, that's the year to get it on that cost. For 8 days at sad, either bit hard so. So, other thing here, yeah, night the kid on the court. It's saying that I be just to eat up and put this, so the read it down. Then the planning meeting, chapter meeting. I read about I was not to do this because I don't need to. Although this case, not all churches were informed yet. So I don't know what about how the from my area. I see Bahashni, this is the site that the mission site regulations. Now the home site lease regulation, the half a mile I do chance even additionally the public hearing even at home site lease regulations within an additional 23 council at received that I don't know. Craigie day is what did about the day best on the so a could are not so even there's on echo amendment to a band needness. But could on a great additionally talk with the great the men Lenigi could the great or London Lenigi pastors and Lenigi I don't know he in me so about the snip with it was under the great hate with the idea with the not net. Not if the Christian church is not was they told the Christian church is seen now. Eba at the snitty that was the husband. According to what they now are here, this stuff. This is better husband, so what are they in about the desk? Because the whole is so what are the night this kid all this. Aber husband, I don't get one net. Don't get one net. So what are they? So had not what they. is about the story of Anashad, the Hazot without never snailness, so the narrow and high neho. But I say, Baba, yes, today. So the equation also, as Nahiki don't have the Nahiki, not so said, I don't know, the Schneider. But maybe at the same time, we should do another one, without the great for all pastors, the great and invite another meet. Could have job everything now done. It was the husband done. The deed I could have only easy yard. So that the no, that she maybe had deeds. None. So it is yet out of a speed or little go. I don't know what Diego City Agi enforcement. Asian could have based upon the dog kissing. I mean, now that it's a hot Sunday. How does she base on deeds at all? A quake is at all. There's a shit out of a no, then the Rego, but a diggy. But it's a oil, the about Papa Nada, and make it. It's need UUFB, Citizen Fund. A do the other Bahaba or the atomic gas pin. Other question ARPA, A do Aja Beton Hay, and Washington Hay, Nelgita. Aja shit, or you at home. So A join the great house, Saint Dot, things to start 2024. With December, I asked me about that. I thought $8 in Aja. Adults with this, adults, 2000 in the Amed, not at a not for that. Are they which is say, how does she pay on it? I thought about this case or did. I see Nico on the radar. But though, to a great horn and the adult Lebanon, the Higgy could order the Aja in nature. The father, though it's once a little bit told, I let out me. The father in Yanado, it's what the hell down me. Either the road or ye got the east case or the God, it is your papa, shouldn't I got it. But and the Padona again, or yet, because of shot, what I call. It's not another shot, the hot Asian, or because of hotel, or your host, a Lincoln. I'll stand up back on now. The men could order not classic here could I see could order over the shot on another could when he cases don't not can learn cases could about and could the national passionate or less could the husband beat I have on it and in age ne so that you see baby passionate or less the crazy that the make off of an but then days in the second house Sunday, so the snow the same Baba now has it all this quite so it was the spare husband even yeah and then Lenny Dana the great dad I didn't have lots of I say the great dad that's a weekend the great church or church and it is in house Dana Sati Lego Lada Dana has Lego so it is Ecuador the great dad I don't know Ecuador teleconference they eat so Craig, you even not a year ago. As I had to let you so either you to ya and a school so you couldn't hit you not given. So it yet all of hospital, but I'll go in. I'll support you guys on this. So either home so hospital is go. I don't know again. So it's not sure that either or never had an idea. That's what I was asking for that today. So yeah, thank you, Mr.
Chair. Thank you, Honorable Daniels. Arabahenji do Nibahan di are the never speculos in the no henji gido yeda anito letigi. Snand ano senegin hin holding what alanan send the don netigi. A coti wins and goshenant and a gay twin arrows de. 3 rooms that reserved all Linkus Johnson the qui pastor do evangelist do reverend kait ashin da bijigin kaido kato di hot abe has ani ilne da bedi nitle do bohna zant ashnant a ko are sa sit leon shin ede be kashida nenegi san handis ato are benach that eating abe ga yasnant
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Abiga ya. I hope that the bigger. Oh, as soon as we can, we'll have Mr. Tahi look into reserving a bigger space for us. That way we can invite other pastors and religious instructors and da beji ki hoste da bedde ni to hande sato ayan case to little to. Abega ha na hosnanta. Any other comments or questions? Tahi, when is the earliest we can have it? Even if we have it on a Saturday morning or something. Because a lot of these pastors, some of them work during the week, and the only time that they would have is probably Saturday, which is the day before church, which is on Sunday. And if we're able to do it like on a Saturday morning from 8 to about whatever time, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, then, we will have listened to them as well.
Members of RDC, would be dependent on the rooms available at Twin Arrows Casino. We're going to use 3 large rooms, the facility usage, and that we still remain with the CDC guidelines and the compliances that are still in place for explanation. Myself and Teresa will look into it, and once we find an open available date for all 3 rooms, I've accommodated a large crowd with enough spacing, then I'll propose that date tomorrow during regular RDC's meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tahi. Mr. Tahi is going to look for a date as soon as we possibly can, hopefully on a Saturday, and invite some of the pastors to come along and listen to what we are discussing on church lease regulations. And honorable members of RDC.
Chairman.
Yes.
Chair. Thomas Walker.
Oh, Honorable Vice Chair Walker, go ahead.
Yes, Chairman, though, committee members, I apologize for getting off the call earlier, so I did miss some of the discussion we're having here. The Budget and Finance Committee, legislation, so bit so do ajugo not the the Resource and Development Committee leadership meeting to so I do support the recommendation that we come together again and bring in stakeholders that are important and critical to this discussion that we're having here. As policymakers, rule makers, so we're not in contact with the people, the very people that whose interests that we're discussing. And I appreciate the idea about coming together with our Christian brothers and sisters, our relatives. As I listen to colleagues here, referencing or relating to issues, concerns that are going on in their respective areas, their legislative districts,
ya tasigi shado shahan ko Southwest Navajo Nation or I need there isn't a rule or policy regulation for every situation. Nor should there be. I think to have rules or regulations for absolutely everything that goes on in our communities or in our lives. And so Bansaskis Johada Hata Itzi Hochutne Yan Sakisi Lego Ako Bez Ani Bahwind Ind Ad Abosh Ijido Adole Hilishana Olzen Edo Nenda Yilla but Ensign Lego had Ida Haldeho. The topics or subjects that are discussed, the problems, the troubleshooting, and then the resolutions to those issues may come out, may be discussed. But there's also other things we can take away. And I know that we're not set out to go beyond the subject and topics, but at the end. I don't know, big one budget or use it. So I stand held I don't cough at it or did not $9. What all the yard just dozens and I couldn't say about this case. I do have a good expectation from such a gathering that we're talking about, Chairman. Oh yeah, it's an energy and Yat Alban Siki such a edo lishiko ko ashin be ten seats in the ko although the organizations just not everyone is formally organized for religious worship appe pagandet ne otado I'd just like to say that through this past 2 years, this pandemic, we've been through. But echo, I don't have she Diego ini be Nahani Yasolin, you tell you doing this whole process, or blooded, I got sohoters and Abesho, Hilka, Hahacho, but Ede, Dot, Che, will Yagi, Ede, Sango, Yedi, Nahato, or Plato, sohoters and Yego, Benjit, Yego, Beha, Nila, don't so about Bansas, Kesiko. See the reasons ko yego shingi klato the nan fandas and so yeah Bansaskis just looking at the chapters that I represent, seen a lot of non-profits and a lot of churches had really gone above and beyond helping our people, and there's that feeling that saying the gratitude or saying thank you is not enough. What the heck? Yeah, go. It's hard. A call what on has a call. Oh, DK bandit in the Suda Ada bandit. His car, yet out the neck, but carefully indication the non should I use she, not just how she a bendit and Lebanon than long at the Stahola. Quite Kayaki, at the dawn, not Hadanza go I don't know, but has adult quite a bandit, and so yes, at that could Actually, they said they have sido the chairman do committee members do land department da ko e ko ya she banna de ido le tigna ada di ni na nan ko eda staff do ado hadi ai da shin ta is ko oda sabe has sido le shin da ke. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Shila. Yeah, Honorable Vice Chair Walker. Araba Hensi do Ani Hot Ocean Bay on today case or Hatsara Dealsen. All of this needed Dina Hunt at the National Need Evan Hot Art Hatsar Dealsen, only had a Nabatsa Dealsen. So it Ocean Satin let a white shot and Lenny so yeah, and had a job button la. A call. This year, Niyat Egi Idel Ebehis Ani do Yat El had a dog Nitlan on it and do that the stakeholders, church, height Ocean Day, yes, to give sto height Ahadods. Enigi Del, Ado Kodoya, we have approximately 462 churches that are scattered across the Navajo Nation. The she what Adolles Ado and Arno Seniki April 23rd gonna end she what it all let one arrows to April 23rd is on a Saturday. A car Ahunzago next month. One more month at the added go ilne the shimbe got the Ado a bekeda le then the following week, has Ani Galia and the Shimbi Gatole. So, it is hot aerolation and Anna Seniki Tadazabahana Ado. Honorable members of RDC or colleagues.
Chair, Delegate Paul Begay.
Honorable Begay, go ahead.
Yeah, Chair, Honorable Delegate Rick Nason, members of the Resource and Development Committee. I really enjoy listening to your meetings. You bring forth a lot of good topics. I really do appreciate this committee. And you do a great job in covering what we need to know. What is this? Or Klana, Betnaz, Angojo, Eba, Wind. Oh, Hayu, Nisitane, Hot Archie, Kida, had attained H.O. in the Natan Khan, a Tenico. Nado, Aho, the Message Zingo. Archon. Natan Conchit in the Hotego ear. Then he had a ho up. Ado inana satnana platna ol taco ear. He sing it dated Jihi Chunayos. A coas art ego ear, so not the hollow. A co in this day and age, I need about how to see it. Though a husband going his ho a co, it is by neatly. Or not they but uniquely citizens, they but uniquely. I don't let what's it now the other. As Justin don't him, he tell you a car at the whole Nissan, the next kitchen that bar has leaked. Called did I don't let you meet a testing leak. A coach to the betor that you zago that kid. That ego that shows citizen 2 million Ben hit $3 so yeah over just case do it on the social media what you to the dot it either got ego the next kitchen that in the hollow at the clash or the or the clash or the kitchen it got ego the car it out abe dan siki so abe ba konitsum ya at $8 also in this case, your benishni, the Honorable Delegate Tom Chi. I've heard him mention a couple times the net, but what not do be banjit either. Actually, the Nahotiko. I show but be cheap, pleasure. He didn't never ought not to be stashed or grass got Nigo, yeah. I believe that's a very good, it paints a very clear picture of how we should consider each other's beliefs. What about this thing? So, yeah, Honorable Chair, my brother, Ricky Nez, thank you.
Akoshila, Honorable Begay, Aro, Natano, Bahinsi, to Ninhinada Hot, Esiki, Bahanits, and Hinabe, Edo, Hate Washington, Shatoyat, Egi, Eda, Bato, Yekendarnish, Ekidat Glash, will get a natural la. Ishman Yehoda Hill, Isha, Shahola, Ishin all get over Chinyada. To a large to a hosen, the Niniki, need on Natana. The navitations in Nikita are there, Hachini Rato Hakailo, Hachin Nako. Ani had their hot in court, Ella. Arat Egan in Nayen than Hen. Of course, that Arne. Wait, Arshin, the Nevic Church of in Soderson, Beshahan Zita Jenny. Kedens now. Hodat Egishin Bay, Yon Sado, Behan Chi Kesigi that Kekidin, Nene, Nipantan Hin, Halet Ado, Yok Edakidin, needed a seat, Linha. Ne, what and lay Ishida, Ligahwin, since the Saturday, Setsilla, at Nego. Joy Sargit at say, but not your Ossigatuna. At say, how long she had Sella had Kena Ratla, on Ego, which Argo, at your Inky your horse even Nehit Silicon, Nahas honey, that was the honey lonin, and Asian his job and not a neat, Ocean neat, and I don't hit Deja, that he didn't know that after. Hit Deja, then he at day, but other at Deja babies actually caho, baby in Sadyat, baby, just kitchen. And 10 years like a yota yarn sick case. Or that even not sad and hit Deja at Deja, but not your horse again. Adoshan na Nenike and Nashi and Nashi became a horse get la. For Nehinata and nada need Lenishin, Nehinat Betty, Nehit Dejon, Hit Seldon, Hikain hit a Nashi Hans, Sagoshin, he had it. Ashin baby kid, I shouldn't need it up at a Hilia and nada need Lenike. Ado Hata Nenike Ha Haya. Had a Halia, Hamara Haja, Hagota e Asho. Da got the church of the height Arshin Zada e Asho e Hada Quaki Ha Qualia. But ya is Hada e Kisoda. Odd a job, but she be Chana need no be Nas old Thunder. This year the door your belt e Elchita. So those and though I could need that need Dinko. Or the hard tons and I'll kid it a nail out that eat dancer. Though hey that sort of doesn't go. This year the lay card done by card. It's an ice trago a belt either. So that's the zando that in yards in yada chill kill I hit your con. That all in there. So here, Honorable Begay. But oh, what on it? I ain't ziggy do, crossing been not Nasnane Katole, and I said, Azabahanana, Zitida. Any comments or questions? At then Gosheti, April 23, go Nashiban Chikestole, Twin Arrows. That week is the spring session from the 18th through the 22nd. So if we're done by Thursday, the 21st, maybe we can schedule something tentatively on the 22nd at Twin Arrows. Akoya ahonit long the 22nd and 23rd gonna the pastors dan linin khahidog khahishin. We'll add that to the agenda and discuss that. Joe, that will be our recommendation, is to have a follow-up meeting at Twin Arrows and open the doors to pastors, evangelists, and other church leaders in reference to this church land use regulations that will be amended. Yes, and I'm not saying I'm not talking. I don't know. I get our staff when you hit one of Mr. Halona, Ms. Eddie, Stephen, appreciate it, and also Stevie in Liena. I always appreciate you sending us the emails. It makes me look at it, and I've always wondered who wants us to be well informed. So thank you for the emails. So yeah, staff, thank you. Honorable Stewart, thank you very much. And then Mr. Tai, always appreciate you taking care of our RDC stuff for us. So yeah, our schedules and everything. I know we put a lot on you, but hopefully one of these days RDC will pitch in and send you to some beach to have a rest. Yeah, thank you. We'll go ahead and adjourn. It's 11:49. Be safe out there, and may God bless each and every one of you.
Hello? Hello?